Brooklyn, New York, the early 1900s. A boy stands mesmerized as a biplane roars across the sky. To most, it's just a spectacle. But to him, it's destiny. He'll grow up to build a plane that will carry Charles Lindbergh across the Atlantic, a plane designed and built in just 60 days. This is the story of Donald Hall, the genius behind the Spirit of St. Louis, and how he helped Lindbergh achieve the impossible. But first, if you're a fan of profound, historic, and timeless stories, you've come to the right place. That's what we do here. HEATHSTORY is where history comes alive, one story at a time. And if you're ready to take off, buckle up. This is a journey you won't forget. Donald Albert Hall was born in Brooklyn on December 7, 1898, into a world on the brink of invention. The Wright brothers' first flight was still 5 years away, but by the time young Donald could walk, machines were transforming life as people knew it. Brooklyn at the time was alive with industry and progress. Trolleys clattered down the cobblestone streets, automobiles were slowly replacing horse-drawn carriages, and bridges like the Brooklyn Bridge stood as monuments to engineering prowess. Hall was growing up in a world where human ambition knew no limits. Unlike most kids his age, Donald didn't spend his time playing stickball in the streets. Instead, he was drawn to his father's workshop, where he could spend hours dismantling clocks, fixing broken radios, and tinkering with mechanical odds and ends. His mother recalled times when she would find him sketching crude blueprints of contraptions only he understood. The sky fascinated him most. When airplanes began to appear over New York, Donald would sprint outside, head tilted back, watching until the machines disappeared into the horizon. While most saw planes as a spectacle, Donald saw them as a challenge. How did they stay up there, he wondered? And what could I build that would fly even farther? Donald's passion for machines took him to the prestigious Pratt Institute, where he studied mechanical engineering. The field was exploding with possibilities, and Hall quickly proved himself as one of the brightest minds in his class. His professors recognized his meticulous attention to detail and ability to think beyond conventional design. After graduating, he quickly became known as a talented draftsman, an aerodynamics designer, landing jobs at major companies like Curtiss Aeroplane and Douglas Aircraft. By the mid-1920s, he was among the most promising young engineers in the burgeoning aviation industry. But his big break, that came in 1927, when he joined Ryan Airlines in San Diego. The company, while small, had built a reputation for producing reliable aircraft. Little did Hall know that his work there would lead to one of the greatest achievements in aviation history. In January 1927, Charles Lindbergh, a 25-year-old airmail pilot from St. Louis, walked into Ryan Airlines with an ambitious request. He wanted a plane capable of flying nonstop from New York to Paris. It was a bold dream, and many thought it was impossible. The transatlantic crossing had already claimed lives. Several pilots had attempted it only to vanish into the ocean. Critics called Lindbergh reckless. What chance did a relatively unknown pilot have when even seasoned veterans had failed? Donald Hall, himself then just 28 years old, was assigned as the chief engineer. One of the first things they did together was visit a local library where they used a piece of string from a grocery package to take measurements off a globe. 3,600 miles, it turned out, give or take a few, most of it across a trackless ocean. Could Lindbergh actually stay awake and pilot a plane by instrument for nearly 2 days? He believed he could, and he'd better be right. His very life would depend on it. Hall later recalled the initial meeting with Lindbergh. He had a fire in his eyes, a determination I hadn't seen in anyone before. I knew right then that was something I wanted to be part of. Though 3 years apart in age, Hall and Lindbergh shared a spark, an immediate connection fueled by their passion for aviation. On February 25th, Lindbergh officially placed his order for the Spirit of St. Louis, and the two men began working side by side to turn the dream into reality. The partnership between Hall and Lindbergh was intense. They spent hours together each day hashing out every detail of this new plane. Most decisions they agreed on, like using a single engine design to minimize mechanical failures and placing the main fuel tanks in front of the cockpit for safety. But Hall worried about Lindbergh's forward visibility as the tanks would obstruct his view. Lindbergh, however, insisted that safety and fuel capacity were more important. With only 60 days to design and build the plane, the pressure was immense. Hall and his team at Ryan Airlines worked tirelessly, accounting for every possible scenario. What if a fuel line broke? What if ice formed on the wings? What if Lindbergh, flying alone, succumbed to fatigue? The controls were designed to be sensitive yet stable, far from perfect, but just enough to keep Lindbergh alert during the grueling flight. Hall quickly realized that modifying an existing Ryan M2 plane would not work. The distance between New York City and Paris, 3,600 miles, required a completely new design. The spirit of St. Louis was born out of necessity, precision, and innovation. For 2 months, Hall barely left the workshop. He sketched, tested, and adjusted every detail, while Lindbergh, ever present, observed, asked questions, and offered feedback. By the time the plane was completed, it was a masterpiece of engineering. Lightweight, efficient, capable of carrying enough fuel for the long journey. It felt like we were racing against time and fate, Hall later said. There was no margin of error. Every decision was a matter of life and death. Hall's sleepless nights were filled with calculations and last-minute changes, every tweak designed to ensure the plane's success. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking about a rivet or a fuel line. The pressure was unlike anything I had ever experienced, he recalled. On May 20th, 1927, the Spirit of St. Louis took off from Roosevelt Field in New York. Back in St. Louis, the city that had backed Lindbergh's endeavor, crowds gathered in anticipation. Radios crackled with updates as Lindbergh soared over the Atlantic Ocean. For 33 and a half hours, Lindbergh battled exhaustion, icing, and disoriented fatigue. He saw ghostly shapes in the clouds, hallucinations brought on by no sleep. The fuel tanks designed by Hall held firm. The lightweight construction held together. Every decision Hall had made in those 60 days was tested in real time. Back at Ryan Airlines, Hall paced nervously, listening for updates on the radio. Every minute felt like an eternity. When the news finally came that Lindbergh had landed safely in Paris, the entire workshop erupted in cheers, Hall later said. We knew we had been part of something that would change the world. After 33 and a half hours in the air, Lindbergh landed in Paris to a hero's welcome. Donald Hall was invited to attend festivities welcoming Lindbergh back to New York in June, where Lindbergh was awarded the Orteig Prize, a $25,000 cash reward offered by New York hotel owner Raymond Orteig for the first aviator to complete a nonstop flight between New York and Paris. The prize had been on the table since 1919, but many had considered the challenge too dangerous, and several attempts had ended in complete disaster. The press, of course, idolized the tall, handsome, brave pilot they dubbed Lucky Lindy. Some attention was directed to others involved in the effort, but the magnitude of Lindbergh's efforts meant that he inevitably received the lion's share of the laurels. The world celebrated his bravery, but for those who knew the story behind the flight, Donald Hall was equally deserving of recognition. Lindbergh himself later credited Hall as the man who had made the journey possible. The two friends kept in touch over the years, maintaining a cordial correspondence and occasionally visiting one another. The Spirit of St. Louis wasn't just a flying gas tank, it was a symbol of human ambition and ingenuity. Its design influenced future long-range aircraft, and its success paved the way for transatlantic and transcontinental flights. Airlines soon began planning commercial routes across the ocean, a development that would have seemed unimaginable just a few years earlier. The flight demonstrated that with enough engineering ingenuity and determination, aviation had no limits. Over the years, it has become an icon of aviation, appearing in countless books and movies and TV shows. Nearly 100 years later, the story of the Spirit of St. Louis continues to inspire dreamers and innovators all around the world. Donald Hall may not have sought the spotlight, but his work changed history. After the historic flight, Hall continued working in aviation, refining aircraft designs and contributing to military and commercial aviation advancements. Though never as famous as Lindbergh, his role in one of history's greatest flights cemented his legacy as one of the pioneers of aeronautical engineering. The Spirit of St. Louis, his engineering triumph, remains one of the most famous aircraft in history, housed in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, where millions have marveled at its design and its significance. Years later, Hall stood quietly in front of the plane at the Smithsonian. "It's surreal," he said to a friend. "I spent 2 months of my life consumed by this machine, and here it is, still flying in a way, inspiring others to reach for the impossible." He admitted to feeling a little doubtful that such a plane could actually be built back then. The boy who once gazed at the skies from a Brooklyn rooftop designed a plane that conquered them. And in doing so, he reminded us all that the greatest achievements begin with a simple dream and a willingness to work tirelessly to make it fly.
New Heath Story episodes drop twice a week only on the Jim Heath channel. If you'd like to help keep Heath Story going, consider supporting us on Patreon.